that was such a good summary. I'm going to skip through the key findings, go right to the data here. First, as Scott said, voters want to make manufacturing jobs the priority, but are even more certain that elected leaders are not acting. So we asked a question where we gave them choices of things the Congress and the President could focus on this year, and asked them to say whether the most important thing, very important, not important at all. And at the very top, we found that voters want Washington to focus on creating jobs, specifically manufacturing jobs. And if you look there, we're ranking these by the people that put it as most important, but at the creating jobs being 56% at the very top, but right below that, creating manufacturing jobs. And both of these, if you look at the very important total, 98, 94%, really right at the top, above reducing the federal deficit, cutting government spending, repealing health care law, reforming immigration, investing in clean energy. And the most change we had when we asked this question from last year is in the increase in people saying that creating manufacturing jobs specifically is one of the most or very important things for the Congress and the President to do. We also gave them a choice then. We forced them to make the choice between which would they rather have Congress and the President focus on, reducing the federal budget or creating jobs, creating manufacturing jobs. Voters want Washington to focus on manufacturing jobs over the deficit by a 2-to-1 margin. 67% saying create jobs, 29% reduce the deficit. Even among the Republican primary voters, a majority puts jobs over the deficit. You look there on the right, and obviously there are a lot of numbers there. I'll just put a red box around the ones relevant to this point. Republican ID, still 53%, likely Republican primary voters 55%, Tea Party supporters 50%, saying creating jobs, making a higher priority over reducing the deficit. Now, when we talk in the focus groups, we did 8 focus groups around the country, from New Hampshire and South Carolina to Ohio and California. Whenever you see a slide like this, there are verbatim quotes from the focus groups. Found out a few people believe their leaders are doing anything to improve the current state of manufacturing. Right now, I don't see anybody doing anything, as one person in Ohio said, a woman in the group that was not reliant in any way or connected to manufacturing. Bad things originated in the last 10 years. No one has done anything about it. Everyone's been complaining, but it's been getting worse. It was one of the people in the Sunnyvale, California, the Silicon Valley area of California. And then in South Carolina, politicians aren't going to talk about manufacturing. They're mostly going to talk about the economy, the war, anything else except manufacturing. And we see this sentiment, which is fairly intense, in the numbers here. Last year, we asked a similar question to this. We split the survey in half, and half the people were asked on the left, do you think President Obama, Democrats in Congress, Republicans in Congress are doing a great deal to help create American manufacturing jobs? Some, not too much or nothing at all. On the right, you see the same question, but asking about enforcing fair trade with our trading partners. And got numbers where you can see President Obama is the only one really to get a positive number there, where more people are saying he's at least doing some or a great deal, more than doing not too much or nothing at all. Go to Democrats in Congress, we have 50% of the people saying they're doing not too much or nothing at all. Republicans in Congress, 60% feeling that way, so they have a negative number. Look at the intensity here. People saying any of these people or groups are doing a great deal, very, very small. Even President Obama, obviously the best known as an individual, the only individual in this grouping, 13% saying he's doing a great deal about either of these items. And you compare that to last year, very consistently, everything's gone down. That's looking at that net number of doing some or a great deal, minus the not too much or nothing at all. And the shift has been only the negative direction on creating manufacturing jobs, and only the negative direction on trade. Now, as Scott said, voters see manufacturing as crucially linked to our economic strength. That was one of the core findings last year. They really do see manufacturing not just as one industry, but the most important industry in the country as a determinant of our American economic strength. And you can see some of this in the focus groups. Again, some verbatim quotes. Without manufacturing, you don't have that base of support. Contributes to every aspect of life, supporting the community, supporting family, provides security, and provides a bedrock we have to rely on for the military. A person in Ohio, we become a third world country if we lose manufacturing. And as someone in New Hampshire said, I've heard it said years ago, that true wealth is created from manufacturing. We've lost so much of it. And we gave people a choice, which we think recreates the choice often put out as to policymakers or by policymakers, the idea that maybe these jobs can go elsewhere, go into different sectors. Voters reject the view that other sectors like services or technology can replace manufacturing. So given a choice, what comes closer to your point of view, 30% last year, 31% this year, say the strength of the American economy is innovation and competition, and if manufacturing leaves, we'll move into new areas like high tech or services, takes place in the future. Less than a third, both this year and last year, say that's closer to their point of view, compared to over 60% for both the last 2 years, saying closer to their point of view is manufacturing is a critical part of the American economy, and we need a manufacturing base here if this country and our children are to thrive in the future. And that is consistent across major demographics. You can see across party, all up in the 60s. There's young men, 1 point lower, upper class voters, 2 points lower. But basically, 60% and above feel that manufacturing is a critical and irreplaceable part of our economy. Voters view American manufacturing and its American manufacturing companies and their products more favorably than in 2010, one of the areas of most change in the poll from last year. Just asking about favorability or asking how they feel about American manufacturing companies. Last year, 68% felt very or somewhat favorable. Now that is up to 90% feeling very or somewhat favorable, and even more of an increase in looking at the very favorable number, going from 22% last year to 66%. So 2/3 of the people being very favorable about American manufacturing companies, and goods manufactured in America already were fairly high favorability. 92% last year has also increased up to 97%. And again, the people feeling that intense favorability, very favorable, going up from 58 to 80% this year. One of the things we saw that may reflect that was in the focus groups, the feelings about the auto bailout, the negative feelings we heard in 2010. In last year's groups, almost erased and almost reversed. Last year, we heard a lot about, look at the auto companies, not sure they got a bailout. They gave bonuses to everyone. I don't want to see another repeat of the disaster of the government bailout. That was a fiasco. Basically, a lot of these people in 2010 not only were angry, but conflated the auto bailout with the Wall Street bailout. So there was a lot of talk about bonuses and big parties. This year, and part of it was timing. It was a lot of time of some of the good news about GM and Ford sales. And we heard that in the groups, though, unprompted. We're hiring again. We just announced a plant expansion in Lexington, another 250 jobs. See, the auto industry is picking up some. Hearing the good news about GM last night, this one of the people in Ohio, it affected me. A month ago, I probably would have said no to taking that money and throwing it into manufacturing when we're so far in debt. But this was like a glimmer of huge hope to hear that news. The company's rebounding. So all very positive feelings about the auto bailout. If it came up, again, it was unprompted. Voters feel we can and must regain our status as the world's economic leader. One of the things we found is they do not think we are that anymore. We saw this last year when 36% only 36% said America is the strongest, the United States has the strongest economy in the world. This is the question on the left. That was last year. This year, now less than a third believe we're the world's strongest economy. And when we ask the people who say that America is not the strongest economy, as you can guess, the winner is China. Last year, they were a few points above America as the strongest economy, 36 to 32. Now their numbers increased 3 points as ours have gone down 4 points. So 39%, thinking that China is the world's strongest economy, and there's really no other country except America, though, in competition. And that is consistent by party: Democrats, Independents, Republicans, Tea Party supporters, Republican primary voters, all 60% and above, saying that we are not the strongest economy in the world anymore. But Americans believed last year, and the same feeling exists this year, overwhelming numbers, that it's both possible and important for the U.S. to have the top economy in the world. On the left, is it possible for the U.S. to have the strongest economy in the world? Last year, that was 85%. This year, it's 88%, and that's consistent across party, very high numbers, 84 to 92%, saying it's possible for the U.S. to have the strongest economy in the world. And important, 67% last year, and the same number this year, say it is important to them for the U.S. to have the strongest economy in the world. So they think it's not just a pipe dream. They also think it's a critical part of rebuilding the economy. Now, they do support a national manufacturing strategy. They're looking for some action from Washington. I talked about that earlier. Now the question is what they're really looking for. First, ask it in a sort of baseline general way, just on approach. Almost everyone wants action to revitalize manufacturing and see a role for government, at least on incentives from trade. I gave them 3 choices for the same question last year. At the bottom, that orange color is we should not get involved in doing anything special for manufacturing. Call this the complete free market option. Got about the same as it did last year, 10 or 11%. But when you look at the top 2, that's the green and that purple, the green is we should do whatever is necessary to revitalize manufacturing. The purple is that, but with some limits. We should help manufacturing, but only if government's role is limited to incentives and trade policy. Last year, those 2 numbers together, saying action all in or action with some limits was 86%. This year it's about the same thing at 87%, but the change is notable in that green bar there. We have an increase in 10 points from 39 to 49 of people, so now we have almost half the people saying we should do whatever is necessary to revitalize manufacturing. We asked them about a generic national manufacturing strategy, just saying, would you support a strategy to make sure, a national manufacturing strategy to make sure economic, tax, labor, and trade policies in this country work together to help support manufacturing? Do you favor or oppose such a proposal? Last year, 78% supported it. This year, 86%. There's also an increase, a 9-point increase in the strong support for it, and that support is, as you can see on the right there, very consistent across party. I don't think it ever gets below the 80s. We also tried it against an argument for and against this. After arguments from both sides, still over 2/3 support a national manufacturing strategy. And the argument against in the purple, I know all of you have access to the deck, so you can take a look at it, but it's really a very, I think, a strong argument, the most negative possible. Government shouldn't be picking winners and losers, especially when we foot the bill for the losers. Instead of worrying about yesterday's factories and bailing out failing industries, we should focus on goods and services of the future. Good jobs of the future, like high tech and services. And then at the end, the last thing, again, going after the bailouts, the last thing we need to do is another special program just to worry about one type of business. As strong as that is, only gets 23%, saying that's closer to their point of view. 69%, even after hearing that argument, favored the idea of this national manufacturing strategy. Looking at some of the top specifics of what could be in that proposal, keeping America's trade laws strong, enforcing a level playing field, most popular proposals, followed by R&D tax credits, Buy American, and promoting exports. All the proposals we tested were getting at the lowest in the mid-80s, but most of them were up at 90% or above. And so at the top here, just point out two, keep America's trade laws strong and strictly enforced to provide a level playing field for our workers and businesses. 76% not only supported, but supported strongly, followed by providing a tax credit to companies that conduct research and development in the U.S. and make their new products here. 74% strong. That's more than if we don't have that last line in there about making their new products here, which only was 64% strong support. But again, all of these are very overwhelming support for all of these proposals. Now, there was a lot we heard about China. Many went to see the U.S. do a better job enforcing trade agreements, particularly with China. The phrase here that's interesting comes up, and again, this was unprompted, taking advantage of or holding them accountable. By nature, no one likes to be taken advantage of. Right now, I feel like we're being taken advantage of by China and their policies. That was one of the Republican primary voters in South Carolina. Washington is not holding China accountable. One of the Ohio women in the non-manufacturing group. And at the end, we have the same sort of feeling in a group all the way across the country. California, we have to stand up for ourselves and stop letting others take advantage of us. So strong sentiment, and I didn't show you the numbers here, but they're in the deck, about unfavorable feelings about companies, about products from China and companies moving to China to produce things. But there's also that sort of positive feelings about things to help American industry here. Already good feelings last year about Buy American, intensified further. 71% last year were favorable of Buy American policies. This year, 80% feel favorable about that, and again, consistent across party. And consistent whether you're a manufacturing household or not. And a plurality feel favorably about protectionism, 45% favorable. Again, very consistent across party. Independents, 43% favorable. Republicans, self-identified Republicans, 44% favorable. Democrats, 49% favorable. Only 15% overall unfavorable. Now, obviously, there are, this is 60% total there, 40% are not sure, but this idea, it does show that this idea that protectionism is a label that should be anathema with voters, really not true. Many more people support it, than they do feel unfavorably about it, though, again, it's not all so well defined for everybody. So, ending up with strategic conclusions, Americans are even more worried about the economy than before. The assistance to manufacturing is a vital way to turn it around. They believe manufacturing is central and irreplaceable determinant of our economic strength. They're increasingly bullish on U.S. industry and extremely concerned about China. Manufacturing jobs judged as a higher priority than the deficit, but voters still feel no one in Washington is doing anything. I think it's one of the most important findings here. Anybody who's been talking about it so far, including from the president on down in both parties, obviously hasn't gotten through. They want a manufacturing strategy, which could include Buy American provisions, cracking down on trade and outsourcing, R&D incentives, and the best case is a positive narrative about creating jobs by making America standing up to regain our place in the world and rebuilding our economy.